Before we jump into this episode, I want to remind you that while Caitlin and Sophia are dietitians, we're not your dietitians. This means the information shared in the Food Freedom Fertility podcast is intended to entertain, educate, and inform. It is not a substitute for medical care. This information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making any changes.
Welcome to another episode of Food, Freedom, and Fertility. I'm here, Caitlin Johnson, your PCOS dietitian, and I'm really excited because we don't have a lot of episodes like this, but I actually have a guest with me today. And this is very exciting for me because I don't often get to show off the amazing interns that I help train to become dietitians. But for a number of years, I have chosen to take on interns, and they usually come to me for about a month and have projects and get to sit in on podcasting and counseling. And today you get the benefit of learning from one of these interns. Probably by the time you're listening to this, she may actually even be a dietitian. So I want you to think about this, that these gals are very experienced, have more education actually than I do, and are going to be able to really help us out with some specific topics today. So today I have Jenna Harry with me, and she's been with me for about a month, and we chose to have her do a project on sleep and PCOS. So I want to welcome you, Jenna, to the podcast. And
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And the first question I want to ask you about this is, what drew you to be interested in looking at the connections between sleep and PCOS?
Well, there were a lot of things that brought me to nutrition and studying this path and going on this path that I went on. But to keep it more specific, the very first time I thought about sleep was when I was about 18 or 19 years old. I felt a little off. I was having acne, just mood swings, and my energy was a little off at that time. And before that, I had been on birth control a few years. So I was like, maybe my hormones are imbalanced. But at the time, I wasn't on birth control. I had gone off of it. So I went to my OBGYN and asked for my hormones to be tested. I said, I think I have PCOS or something of that nature. And he said, you do not have PCOS. You are not overweight. And I said, well, there's something going on with me, and I would really like to figure it out. And I asked, can I please get my hormones tested? And at the time, I didn't have someone like Caitlin in my life who could tell me which hormones to test, or, how to even look at hormonal testing. So I didn't really have that guidance, but I said, there is something going on and I would like to get to the bottom of it. So he finally let me get my hormones tested. And it turned out that I had high DHES from my adrenals. And I don't know what else was going on, but that was the big thing he pointed out. And he wrote consistent with PCOS on my paperwork, but he never told me I had PCOS. And so I had more of an adrenal PCOS picture, I think, now looking back with more of the knowledge I have now. Mm-hmm. And at the time, he prescribed me spironolactone and birth control again. And he said, this will help balance your hormones. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll take another swing at medications and see if that helps me. And I took it for about a month, and I had the worst symptoms from it. I felt very fatigued. I felt just a little off. And I had really clear skin from the medications, but I didn't really care about the external symptoms. It was really how I felt internally that I was wanting to seek. And so at that point, I went off the medications after a few months. And I really just looked at my lifestyle and how I was living at the time. And I was working really late hours as a server, getting off at 11 p.m., going to sleep at 3 in the morning. And then I was going to school during the week and getting up kind of early, not getting the best sleep, maybe sleeping sporadically on the weekends and sleeping in when I could, and really misaligned with my circadian rhythm at the time. And beyond that, I was somewhat interested in nutrition, but I was eating sporadically because of my schedule. And I knew that the sleep was one of the biggest drivers of my symptoms and being so go, go, go and not slowing down. And so I think that's why I chose this topic today, because it was very healing for me beyond just the nutrition piece and other things that go into health. It was the sleep.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think we don't often kind of zoom out so thoughtfully about our overall health and like what else could be impacting these hormones. For you to do that
Exactly.
at 18 or 19, I think is worth like recognizing and applauding a little bit, because most 18 and 19-year-olds don't have that self-awareness. Honestly, I'm going to be 40 next year. I don't know that most 40-year-olds have that self-awareness to like actually try to comprehensively assess like what's actually going on here, and then be concerned enough about your health to try to make strategic decisions about your life. Like maybe I need to get a different job other than serving, or maybe if I'm going to continue serving, I'm going to choose different hours even though the tips aren't as good, because my health can't suffer like it's suffering right now. And I think the other thing that your story very generously shares, and I want to thank you for tying kind of that personal piece to it. It's hard to be transparent with strangers who are going to listen to this, so thank you for that.
Of course.
Is a frustration a lot of women are going to relate to. One, walking into their doctor and saying, I know I'm having this issue and I want to test, and being written off kind of almost immediately because you don't have the outward appearance of a syndrome you're concerned you might have. You don't fit the typical quote unquote, you don't look like you have PCOS. And so it's probably not PCOS. And therefore, because it doesn't look like that, let's not look under the rock. Like, let's just avoid that the rock's there. Actually, instead of turning over the rock and looking underneath it, let's just give you medication that pretends it's not there, is kind of a lot of the Western allopathic approach to PCOS. And so I'm sorry that you had to advocate so hard. And I kind of wish that would change about our medical system to where if you are concerned, and just even for peace of mind that it isn't that, that should be reason enough for a doctor to say, well, let's look a little bit deeper, or let's have a thoughtful conversation about why I think we should at least put off holding, looking at those labs, because X, Y, and Z might be a more obvious explanation. And let's walk down this path first. Like that would be a fair thing to say. But if the only thing that they say is it's probably not this because you don't look like this, so we're not even going to address the concerns that you have brought up, that's a very frustrating scenario, whether it's exactly the same concerns or not. Too many people are going to resonate with in your part of the story. And then, funnily enough, I don't really know that it's funny, that his end conclusion was that it was consistent with PCOS. And I just want to speak to that a little bit. The androgen that Jenna experienced higher levels of is an adrenally produced androgen. So the organs that sit kind of on the top of your kidneys that produce hormones that respond and help us respond to danger and stress, that help us run from, a fire, but that also help us manage heavy workloads like working at night and while going to school. Those same organ systems are helping and creating hormones to help you manage the demand that's put on your body right now. And one of the hormones that organ system makes is called cortisol, and cortisol is a stress hormone. I'm explaining this not because Jenna needs to learn, but because I think this will be helpful for someone. It's actually not so much the issue of cortisol when we talk about PCOS symptoms. It's how your body responds to how much cortisol you're making that becomes important for PCOS symptoms. Specifically, the way your body protects your brain is by making this hormone DHEA. We sulfate it and then we start calling it DHEAS. That's what that S means. But that hormone protects too much cortisol going across the blood-brain barrier. It protects your brain from too much stress. We don't want inflammation within the brain. And so there's this protective mechanism. So very often it's hard to, on a blood test for high levels of cortisol because you make it in response to things and there's kind of daily rhythms to it. We often look at it when people wake up. It's very hard unless you're like sleeping at the doctor's office to get an accurate reading of what your cortisol awakening response is. You may hear that in the functional medicine world. It's where when you wake up, you start making more cortisol. It's an awakening response. It helps you wake up. It helps you respond to the demands of the day, meaning having energy to make breakfast and energy to go light the fire or drive to work or, whatever the demand on the body is right now. And that's hard for us to actually accurately assess. And so oftentimes in the functional medicine world, we turn to urine or saliva because we can get to those time points and look at that initial peak of cortisol and then decrease of cortisol in the morning window. Because that's hard to get and sometimes kind of expensive, and because DHEA helps protect the brain from high levels of cortisol, sometimes what we can infer when we see high levels of DHEA is that you're dealing with a lot of stress. And you could have probably verbalized that to the doctor without being incredibly introspective. But what was available to the doctor to help you address this higher hormone, DHEAS, was something, well, actually two somethings that help lower androgens, and they help in different ways. Spironolactones is going to help you spill them through your urine, and birth control is going to help you make less of them. It's actually much more effective at helping you make less testosterone. But another thing that birth control pills are very effective at, if you're on the right kind for PCOS, is helping you make more sex hormone binding globulin. And sex hormone binding globulin is kind of like Miss Pac-Man. It goes around and it eats up the sex hormones, which DHEA is one. So
Hey, Food Freedom and Fertility family, it's Sophia introducing Fertility Cloud. High treatment costs can be daunting, but here's some good news. 80% of Fertility Cloud patients have gotten pregnant for under $2,000 after just 5 months of treatment. Starting your family doesn't need to come with a huge price tag. Fertility Cloud virtual consultations mean you can talk to them from the comfort of your couch. They create personalized plans for men and women, whether it's ovarian stimulation with Clomid or Letrozole, Ovidrel trigger shots, guidance on male fertility, or even weight management support with medication. As a special for Food Freedom and Fertility listeners, get $50 off your initial medical doctor consultation. With meds delivered in just a day or two, unlimited support for your questions, and free follow-ups when needed, they're here to make your path to parenthood smoother and more affordable.
hormonal birth control can be helpful to lower this more adrenal-based androgen, but it's not doing it by stopping your body from making it. It's almost in its ability to help your body turn off that androgen more. I can see, though, if stress was the main driver of the hormonal mechanism that was helping your body address the impacts of stress, just turning off the hormone response, essentially making you spill out extra androgens through your urine or making more of this hormone that turns off that androgen. Well, if we kind of follow that process along, what effect would that have? Then you would not have the protection for your brain that enough DHEA would provide. So see how we've created a completely different problem by not addressing the root problem. And I know this is not
Right.
what we decided to talk about, but that would lead to somebody feeling more stressed, actually more fatigued, because the DHEA is helping us address our stress levels and would manage kind of the burnout side of high levels of cortisol. But we've just taken away one of the protective mechanisms that your body was using to respond to that stress. So over time, that will start impacting so many different areas of what high androgens do. High levels of DHEA, if we don't address this, may cause hair to fall out. It may cause poor egg quality, which is going to lead to cycle disruptions. It may cause acne. It may cause hirsutism. It may just cause kind of this feeling like you're kind of always in fight, flight, or freeze, and you're amped because it's actually giving you a little bit more energy to push through that moment. Which a lot of people who would say, I think I have an adrenally linked or adrenal based PCOS, often relate to. They relate to this feeling of like, I feel so stressed out. And then at the end of the day, when it's time to shut up shop, I can't. It's like I was tired all day and then the lights turned on bright at night and I can't calm down, which is inevitably probably why you resonated with this topic so much. I don't know. We actually haven't talked about this, which is kind of interesting to me now that I'm interviewing you. But I can see why you would be drawn to this topic. And I'm so glad I didn't squash the topic idea because I think maybe there were probably a lot of really healing aha moments for you in this. And how cool is that?
Even just now with you talking about how lowering the DHES and how it's a protective mechanism, and that lowering it can actually maybe perpetuate that anxiety or stress because it is that protective mechanism. It's crazy. I didn't even think about that until you brought it up. But I think that being on the medication, the biggest improvement was my skin, and it wasn't ever how I felt internally. So that would make sense completely.
Yeah.
It's eye opening.
Yeah. And I mean, we could go on a whole rabbit hole on this, but I'll succinctly say I am not anti birth control and I'm not anti spironolactone, but
Right.
a prescribing provider should be able and willing to have this entire conversation about how the mechanism these medications will use will actually help you. And if they, and this is the frustrating part, is how do you know if like their assessment of that is good? Because you were 18 and 19, you didn't have a, now you have a essentially like a mini biochemistry degree. Like to become a dietitian, listeners, you have to take as much science as like the pre-med kids do. It's just like when they go into surgical rotations, we go into cooking classes and it's in my opinion way more fun. But there's not a lack of scientific knowledge or ability to kind of wade through these things. And so and I'm not saying doctors don't have that, but they're often expert in so many things. That OBGYN is a surgeon and they cut babies out of bellies when there's an emergency, right? Like they have to be expert in that too and may not know all the things other than the standard of practice when we think it's PCOS is give these two medications. So, yeah, I mean, I just want you to hear, listener, it's okay to take birth control if that's what you need. It's okay to take spironolactone. I'm not anti those, but I am anti throwing a medicine at something, just hoping it's going to work without asking more questions. I think that really does us a disservice. And unless that medication at some point is like that life-saving piece. Jenna wrote an article about sleep and PCOS, which you can also find in the PCOS app. And then I went in and kind of layered in my own experience. And so it's kind of co-written by us. And I explain in it that something that saved my life was anxiety medication. And it actually was the number one thing that helped my sleep in a very critical time in my life. So just hear me now. There are times and places for these things. and if it's a scenario where like it's really going to impact your life in so many ways, like let's try it, and then we can take off that support when we're ready to, when we feel like we can manage these other really hard things in our life. But sometimes it's not the time, and saying let's do it all naturally or holistically is going to be worse for your mental health and something you might not even be capable of right now. And so it's okay to kind of layer in these supports and have those supports change as your body changes and you change or your priorities change, etc. So, okay, we've done a lot of talking that had very little to do with sleep.
Yeah, I was gonna to add to that too. I am not anti-medication either. I just had that experience, but I know so many other women on spironolactone that have had great results and they feel good on it.
Mhm.
So I don't want to knock that. Just
Yeah,
wanted to
absolutely.
put that out there.
I think, that scenario of like, don't judge a person until you've walked a mile in their shoes.
Mhm.
If you're that woman who half their hair is fallen out and they struggle looking at themselves in the mirror because they feel not beautiful compared to what culture's standard of beauty is right now, that's really hard. And if spironolactone is the life vest right now, or like we're throwing that, those little circle life, what are those things called? Like we're throwing the thing out to you while you're drowning in the ocean and it's going to save you. Like we can work on drinking more green tea and these other natural approaches as we give you like a chance at life, right? So, um,
Yes,
if you're
absolutely.
somebody with cystic acne that you've tried everything and spironolactone is helping right now, or birth control is helping right now, don't don't get bullied by influencers on social media who are anti those medications, because they might be the exact right thing for you right now. And another piece about holistic and natural medicine, which I would throw nutrition right in the center of, it's a piece of the overall puzzle and very much can be a root cause approach, which aligns with a holistic approach. And natural just being a way to approach health and well-being with the building blocks and with nature versus just like throwing a pharmaceutical at it. While they can be helpful, they're often much slower medicine. And sometimes you need that quick save or that quick win right now to even be able to like lift up that next thing and try. And so, hear me now that those things, they can be really helpful, and don't don't let yourself be bullied. What I think that's also beautiful in Jenna's story right now is this sense of like listening to yourself. Like I think that women have this intuition and kind of inner knowing of like something's not right and I want to know more and I need to get to the bottom of it. And if you feel that way, like it sounds to me, and maybe I'm assuming this, you can correct me, Jenna, that maybe you didn't expect that medication to be that much help because you'd been on birth control and you went off of it. And it's almost like, I'm willing to try it, but I don't have high hopes. Like,
Yeah,
is that
I
fair?
think that's a fair assessment. I think I had at some point in my life felt like more balanced, and then going on the birth control kind of
Or
made
the
me feel
balance away?
unbalanced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's kind of my story, and I know other people use it the opposite way. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's why I felt that way going back on it.
Mm-hmm.
But hearing about what spironolactone can do, but even in and of itself without the birth control, I knew I was willing to try.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, and I'm glad I tried it. And
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
it did have benefits
So
for
the
sure.
so the interesting thing, like just hearing that, is like you made a decision that aligned with, um, who you are and how you felt about medicine, and like I think a lot of times we get pushed into trying more natural or we get pushed into trying more medicine, and
Yeah.
it's the only thing that's offered to us, and like learning how to eat differently or learning what supplements and how do you trust the information. So a lot of us can feel like you're just like spinning around in this chair and then you stop and it's like let's just try this next solution. what I would encourage you to do, and what I think is really beautiful in Jenna's story, is she had a really strong sense of who she was, what was wrong, and kind of listened to herself. And there are people that I've spoken with as clients, as friends, that are like, I know that I don't want to take that medicine. That medicine's not going to help me, whatever the medicine is, and whatever we're talking about, PCOS or otherwise. Like, I also think that that voice is worth listening to. Um,
Mhm.
and that may not be the end of the story. Like, maybe that person needs to be educated on why. For instance, I'm having this conversation with my dad right now, who's going through chemotherapy, who's struggling to get enough to eat. And I'm saying it's time for the appetite stimulant. And he's like, whoa, 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 I don't want that because I'm already fighting to swallow. He has esophageal cancer. I'm already fighting to swallow. I don't want to feel hungry and be having a difficulty getting enough. And I'm like, well, yes, that's actually exactly why I'm telling you we need it, is because you do need to fight so hard, and I need you to be more invested in that fight. And I think if you felt more hungry right now, you have no appetite, right? And so he's kind of changed his tune. It was important, kind of that discussion and education around it. But sometimes you just know, and there's just like this inner knowing that you have, whether that's God or intuition or whatever you want to say. Um, Maybe a little bit of all of it. I don't know. They're like, you feel very strongly and you're compelled about this. And so you just need to speak up, or you just know, I'm not going to do that. And as a practitioner, I will say, I am very apt to probe that in clients. Why do you feel that way? Tell me more about that. And listen to them. Listen that, you know, why do you feel like we need to draw these labs? You don't look like PCOS, but why do you feel like it? And get more information so that I can come alongside you as a practitioner and really help, right? Um, and I just want to encourage you, listener, that kind of inside voice, if you know something's wrong or you don't want to take that approach, like, don't question yourself so much. Continue to advocate and fight for good care. I'm sorry that you have to, but you probably do. And respect that, because I think it's a really beautiful way that you can grow as a woman, as a human being, but particularly in this like femininity. I think there's something special that women have in that way that I'm not sure men really have. This is my own opinion. There's no science behind this. You know, hear me out,
I agree with it.
but I think that and like, it's beautiful and we should tap into it more. Okay, soapbox off. I hopped off it. Let's talk about sleep. Okay, so you're drawn to this, you have a personal connection to it. Like, if you were painting a picture and we had like sections in view, what are things you would think about when you think about the connection between PCOS and sleep?
So there are a few things that come to mind. It's our hormonal profile as a PCOS patient or client. So the main hormones that I think of are insulin, progesterone, and cortisol.
Okay, so if those are the first few hormones that you think about, let's put them in their own buckets and maybe give kind of a sense, or like, we're looking at a canvas and it's a painting, and like over here there's the kids playing with balloons, and over there there's a carnival ride, and over there there's like kids throwing bread to the ducks. This is my painting. It's very happy. It's like a carnival day and everybody's in 1800s dresses. Okay, so like cortisol is the kids playing with the ducks. What's going
Okay,
on in that part of the painting? How do we draw that into this like overall composition of PCOS?
good question. So cortisol, kids playing with the ducks. I'm
Yeah,
trying to connect
I'm just,
those two in my
no,
brain.
don't think of the painting. This is probably a terrible
Okay.
example. I'm just saying, like, there's this big painting. It's like this day at the park, and there's
Yes.
different areas, and we can like stand and look at all these different areas. All of it's a PCOS person. It's a
Okay.
terrible example. Listeners, forgive me. It's not Jenna. But like, in this painting, there's all these different things going on. No, it's a terrible example. Do you
No,
get
I'm
what?
tight. I'm getting it.
Okay.
It's flowing into me right now. So Cortisol, when I think about it, I think of your annoying boss at work or skipping breakfast and fueling your day with coffee on a busy morning, to name just a few examples. And that can flood your body with cortisol from that stress response. And that stress hormone is made in the adrenal glands that sit on top of your kidneys. And although it's super important for energy to wake us up in the morning and back in the day to run from a lion that was chasing us, that's what makes those PCOS symptoms rise. Having that consistent stress hormone that's flooding into a PCOS body. And that is one piece of the puzzle.
Hey, friends, we're taking a break from this episode so I can share with you a little more about one of our sponsors, Fullwell. Fullwell's a reproductive health company offering superior nutritional supplements that are made without compromise to support women and men throughout their reproductive journey. I have taken Fullwell's prenatals, their fish oil, and have literally tried every product they've released, and I stand behind this recommendation with my whole heart. One of my favorite things to recommend to clients is their fertility trio. This includes their egg and sperm quality supplement, their women's prenatal, and fish oil. This helps proactively support you getting ready to conceive. This trio includes things like CoQ10, ashwagandha, and NAC. It makes me think of a life vest. You don't want to go into pregnancy without these foundational supports. And if you've been struggling while trying to conceive, this is the time to upgrade your prenatal fertility game and check out Fullwell. Use code FFF20 today to get 20% off your first order. So when we think about higher levels of stress, draw a line for that for me and its impact on sleep.
So it is normal for cortisol to rise in the morning. It wakes us up in the morning. It starts to peak in the mid-afternoon, and then it declines towards the end of the day. And then melatonin kind of gradually produces and fills in as cortisol gets lower at the end of the day.
We call
And
that a diurnal pattern where like there's kind of two pieces of it and they're opposite one another. So in the morning time, we're thinking about lots of cortisol, less melatonin because you're waking up, right? And then in the
right,
evening, we want less cortisol and more melatonin.
right.
And so if that is disrupted, is that what you're saying?
Yes, if it's disrupted, then if we have elevated cortisol towards the end of the day, that can keep us up at night and not allow for melatonin production to come in and have us rest and wind down at the end of the day. So it can
Yeah,
make you feel wired at the end of the day, leading
absolutely.
to delay in sleep or sleep quality.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing about that, like consider what we talked about at the beginning. Higher levels of cortisol mean higher levels of DHEAS. And
Right,
DHEAS is an androgen that's going to drive symptoms. So not only can we draw a line from cortisol to sleep quality and its interaction with melatonin and interaction just with energy levels, we can also draw a line from cortisol to hair loss and acne and egg quality and cycle disruptions. And that is also really frustrating and stress inducing, right? Stress in
absolutely.
and of itself is also something like hormones aside, ruminating thoughts and high levels of burden on you, where you feel like you don't have adequate resources to handle the burden, whether that's enough time in the day, enough finances, enough emotional bandwidth for the difficult things going on in your life. Like that will keep you thinking and having a hard time shutting your brain off too. And I think that that brings an interesting conversation with sleep and PCOS. Like, I think with a lot of these things, we'll say which one came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, did the high
Right.
cortisol make the PCOS worse? Did, like, did the extra DHEA actually also gives you energy? So, like, is that making it harder to fall asleep? So it doesn't actually really matter. It's a cyclical cycle. So we get kind of put in that you're now the mouse on the turning thing, right? He's like running in the race that he'll never win. And the more he goes, the more he has to like catch himself in this hamster wheel. And so we have to come in and stop the hamster wheel. We have to. And so instead of talking about these 3 different buckets and then talking about ways to improve it, I want you to think about some of the things you wrote about that could directly impact melatonin or cortisol. So what are ways somebody could improve their sleep by impacting their cortisol levels?
I think one of the big ones is creating a relaxing bedtime ritual before bed.
Mm-hmm.
That can lower cortisols by doing reading, gentle yoga, a warm bath, and putting away screens, which we know the blue light can keep you up at night as well. So having those relaxing moments where you can unwind and decrease cortisol output are huge.
Mm-hmm. I hear the listener sighing. They're like, Jenna, I don't want to turn my Netflix off. Jenna, don't you know after I put my kids to bed, I finished answering emails on a screen?
Get that.
And listener, I feel that way about Jenna right now too. No, I'm kidding.
I understand. I don't take my own advice all the time.
No, totally. But what I will say is this. I did this with actually a cohort. I did group coaching about 2 years ago. We started in January, and this was one of the first things I made them do because everybody had a problem with it. And we all committed for an entire month to sleep with our phones outside of our room. We committed to an entire month choosing at least one thing to do between watching or texting or whatever people do on their phones at night or with their TV or whatever. Commit to doing, we insert one ritual. So is that making a cup of tea and laying in bed? Is it reading? Is it gentle stretching or yoga? Is it a conversation with your partner? Is it snuggling your dog? Like, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to like feel like you have to record yourself on Instagram and make a reel documenting how incredibly perfect your life is. That's not what we're doing here. We're trying to make your hair stop falling out. Okay, so tie into the why and kind of disconnect a little bit from the trying to curate, have a curated view of your life. Okay. Make the tea and get in bed and snuggle your dog, or brush your teeth and then do some stretching and some deep breathing and hang out with your journal for a minute, or just pick one of those things. And at the very least, separate the screen for 5 minutes from when you lay down and see what that feels like. Because I promise you, it's actually going to feel better and you're going to get some peace from that. And then that little bit of currency of like, this feels good and I want more of the good can pay rich dividends in the next thing you add in. So that would be my encouragement is instead of hating Jenna and I for recommending this, tie into your why and then connect that to something you're willing to do. And when you get to the end of the day and you're laying in bed, binging, scrolling on TikTok or something, and you're thinking, man, I told myself I was going to do this. I was going to light a candle and drink a cup of tea before bed. I want you to actually remember that you want your hair to stop falling out. I don't want you to think about how tired you feel. I want you to remember that there's a symptom you're trying to improve here, and your overall health is what's at stake. And I want you to take that as seriously as you take your current feelings in the moment of being tired, because that's actually what we want. We want you to be tired and we want you to get good sleep. And that little bit of ritual and consistency in bedtime will go a long way in training your hormones to make more melatonin at the end of the day and turn off that cortisol. Okay, bucket 1, cortisol. What's the second bucket you want to talk about? We're now in my picture that tripped us up. We're at the carousel that's spinning. It's just a different part of the PCOS picture.
We could chat about insulin resistance.
Okay, tell me about that. How does that connect to sleep?
So that happens when the body cells are not responding as efficiently to blood sugar. So when you consume a meal and your blood sugar rises, it's hard to get that blood sugar into your cells. And so your body keeps producing insulin, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to give that signal to let that sugar into the cell. And because that communication is on, it can lead to insulin resistance. And when we're not able to have a regulated blood sugar, this can impact sleep from preventing us from falling asleep if our blood sugar is off, whether it's low, high. Going from a high to a low blood sugar right before bed, you're going to feel like you're hungry, like you want to eat before bed.
Mm-hmm.
And or if you go to bed hungry, you might wake up in the middle of the night
Mm-hmm.
because you're dysregulated and feeling that low blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And your body's responding to that and waking you up, not allowing you a good night's sleep. And so one of the big things we can do to help with that is starting the day with a protein and fiber rich breakfast.
I love
So
that.
we're setting the scene for better sleep at the beginning of the day.
Yeah, you
And
don't
by
really think
doing
about
this,
that, do you? Like, oh, my breakfast is going
right,
to help me sleep better tonight.
exactly. It's huge. I feel like we always think of the things right before bed, the relaxing rituals, and those are helpful, of course, but starting at the beginning of the day with the blood sugar regulation sets you up for the remainder of the day with blood sugar regulation up until sleep. And then that can significantly help with better sleep quality and staying asleep, and then decreasing that late night snacking that might happen if we started the day with dysregulated blood sugar.
Mm-hmm. It's
And we go
interesting.
on that. Yeah.
When I think about insulin resistance, one of the things that you can find information on in the app in a handful of different areas is this idea of extending your overnight fasting window, and that um, not like a intermittent fasting schedule of don't eat for 16 hours a day and eat for 8, but like stop eating maybe 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed. Don't have a snack right before bed, and see if you can stretch from that last meal or snack to breakfast, eventually get to at least a 12-hour overnight fast. That actually really improves insulin levels and it helps insulin clearance. And even if we don't adjust caloric intake or outtake very much, it actually can help with weight management with PCOS, because insulin is a growth hormone that signals fat storage. And if you aren't eating right before bed, you're not binging in the evening on Doritos or cookies or ice cream or something like that. Or if you have to eat, eating something more well balanced with protein and fiber, you won't have that high level of insulin going into a period of time where honestly you're not doing a lot of work. Now you are. Your brain is doing stuff, your um, GI tract is doing stuff, your heart is still beating, you're still breathing. There's caloric use overnight. Don't get me wrong. It's not like we're computers that we can just like turn off and then turn back on. It's not how humans work. But you're not like running in your sleep. You're not writing a research paper. You're not cooking dinner. Metabolically, you're doing a lot less. And so you don't have the ability to use that energy that you're taking in a meal or a snack before bed in the same way. And with an insulin spike, your body will then tell you itself to store that, when it should be a time that your body is actually pulling from energy sources in your body, in your liver, in the form of glycogen, in your muscles. And if it doesn't need to do that, you do have a more difficult time managing weight. And we care about sleep and PCOS because we want to have energy and feel good, but a handful of people listening to this are also trying to lose 100 or 200 pounds, because that's a huge struggle that a lot of women with PCOS have. And understanding that improving insulin resistance can help improve sleep, which will help you exercise and eat well. Also, extending your overnight snack a little bit so that it improves sleep, that it, or increasing your overnight fast to improve sleep and kind of extend that out is also going to improve your insulin resistance. So once again, and this may be a common theme in all of this, where's the chicken and the egg? Like, improving sleep is going to improve insulin resistance. We see that in studies when those are the two variables we're touching. Improving insulin resistance can improve sleep and can lower risks of other things that are going on related to sleep. And so we kind of have this give and take that, once again, we just want to like stop that mouse in its repetitive run and say, let's improve both. So I love that. Eat a good, strong breakfast. That will set you up for better blood sugar throughout the day. It's going to set you up to not binge at the end of the day, believe it or not. It will help you sleep better later on. And if we can have a good enough overnight fast, we can also improve things like insulin and maybe reach whatever your PCOS symptom goals are a little bit faster. And so and that's partly why it's an imperfect example. I want to paint this idea of a tapestry or a picture because we have different zones in the picture, but they all touch each other. Like, let's pretend my picture is a day and you're at the park in too big of a dress in the 1800s and somebody's on a carousel, but you're with the kids throwing bread to ducks. You're hearing the joy of the carousel happening over there, right? Like, you're hearing the glee and the sounds. I don't even remember what else other people were doing at the park. But like, you're seeing that it's all interconnected, and it builds this beautiful painting, and it can feel that way in reverse too. Like, if you think of it as like a more of a foreboding image of things are rough and hard, and it's a picture of depression time era, and there's not enough food, and there's men going and standing in the line to get a job, but there's no job to be had. And then there's the mom at home washing clothes and working so hard, and then needs to leave at night to try and earn money there. It's like everything is touching each other, and it all hurts, and it's stuck, and they're interacting, and it feels really heavy. Your PCOS symptoms can feel that way. The hormones that impact these things can feel that way too. And it's all really hard. But they're not mutually exclusive. It's all kind of a give and take. And your insulin's going to impact your cortisol, and your cortisol is going to impact your insulin. And we're not even going to kind of dive into that, but it's true.
Sophia here, interrupting this episode to talk about fond bone broth, tallow, and lard. So fond bone broth has long since been a staple in my home kitchen. I use this all the time. You will always find it in my kitchen. And do you know what? I even make my own bone broth. That's how much I love fond, is I pay money for something that I also regularly make for myself. It is beyond delicious. The flavors that they have in these broths, it's so deep and complex. It's not like a can of Swanson's. It's not just like the chicken and stars type flavor, though that can be delicious at times. This is such a complexity of flavor. It's almost like a beverage, and I'm not exaggerating. Plus, you can use it in cooking, everything from vegetables, starches, grains. Very, very easy way to get more collagen, protein, and minerals into your life by simply cooking with broth. It is truly delicious, and it will take any dish you use to cook with it, from just a normal dish on the table to truly gourmet. So head on over to fondbonebroth.com and use code FFF10 for 10% off your first time order. Bye.
What's the
Yes.
third bucket? What's the other hormone we're talking
Yeah, it's
about?
all connected. So I'm trying to get onto your PCOS picture in the park. So I think progesterone, I would kind of consider like someone laying down on their blanket on the grass in the park, just resting. The
Mm-hmm.
restful hormone, it
Yes.
promotes
Yeah.
rest and relaxation after ovulation and into pregnancy. It's very important as well. And it's kind of that slowing down hormone. I think of it
Mm-hmm.
as that. And having low progesterone, that's common with women in PCOS. It can be from stress and poor sleep. And so still it's the chicken and the egg situation, like Caitlin said. Is it the PCOS is causing low progesterone, or is it the stress and the poor sleep that's really promoting the low progesterone levels? And so that really ties into the cortisol point too. Having really high cortisol consistently can lower your progesterone levels. And so the same solutions are there for both low progesterone and cortisol. It's the resting, the slowing down, and getting that good quality sleep, and trying to promote more rest and more time for creativity, spending time with friends, and things that really promote decrease in stress levels and promote an increase in your progesterone levels. It's a huge piece of the puzzle, and it's all tied together. But it's also tied to the insulin too, because
Mm-hmm.
having those highs and lows of insulin and your blood sugar regulation, when it's up and down and not as steady, that can really cause another stress on the body and contribute to lower progesterone levels. It's all connected.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge correlation there. Higher insulin resistance is like a direct impact on whether you ovulate. And if you don't ovulate, you don't make progesterone. There's another progesterone in your body called 17-OH progesterone, and that's one that actually your adrenal gland makes, but it doesn't have the same impact. And it doesn't do the same things within your uterus to hold in the lining and then signal to let the lining go if you aren't pregnant. It doesn't raise your body temperature like progesterone does, this particular type of progesterone we're talking about. And so there is this piece of like, do you have low progesterone? Like you don't make enough when you do make it? Or do you not? Do you have low progesterone because you don't make it because you're not ovulating? And you could be either one of those, or you could be um, like, especially in my early years of PCOS and not having a handle on how my body needs me to behave to manage it well. Um, there were times where I would go 4 or 5, 6 months without any cycle and there was no ovulation happening. And other times where I might go like 40 days without ovulating, and then it's like a 55-day cycle. And either way you look at that, there wasn't enough progesterone for the amount of days there were. And when it was there, it may not have been as effective as it should have been, because it may not have been the best egg that got ovulated, leaving behind a really healthy, fluffy corpus luteum to make the progesterone. So insulin does have a direct line, and progesterone is much more important than anybody has ever probably told you before, unless you've been hanging out with me a lot. And we want to get you comfortable with how to get progesterone made and get it made so that you can benefit. So, talk to me about if somebody wanted to kind of take these buckets that we've talked about and maybe address a couple suggestions on how to improve sleep, irrespective of the bucket, and maybe a different example than we've touched on already, like eating a breakfast or going to bed at the same time with a ritual. What are other suggestions people could just like um, kind of broad strokes of areas we can help with sleep quality?
Yeah, I think those are good things to start with, but some other amazing things that can help support PCOS are getting some sunshine in the morning. Even as little as 10 minutes can be beneficial. You're getting that vitamin D from the sun, you're exposing your light to the sunshine, and telling your body it is time to be awake,
Mm-hmm.
and getting those signals to your brain that it's time to be awake and to set yourself up for better sleep at the end of the day. Because if we're inside all day, blinds are closed like how I have right now in my house, there's no light in here. If I didn't go out all day, I think that would impact my sleep a lot, because
Mm-hmm.
you're not able to shift from that daytime to that restful time where it's
Mm-hmm.
dark out and the moon is shining and it's time to rest. So that's another big thing that can help. Even just 10 minutes in the morning can be
Mm-hmm.
beneficial.
I think too, like a thought about that I relate to is also just the nervous system regulation. I feel like this is a hot topic now. Like it gets a lot more. I don't know if you feel this way, or I'm in an echo chamber in my news feed on my phone and my social media, but I feel like Also, as a parent, nervous system regulation is just a huge piece of learning to manage our own emotions and thus our behaviors. But 10 minutes outside or even 10 minutes viewing nature, if the climate doesn't allow for outside, can do a lot for you to just sit and be still and observe nature. And we know that it does. We know it lowers blood pressure. We know it does all these things. But what if you challenged yourself to do it in the morning for light and then you do it again around lunchtime or in the evening, just because it's good for your mental health, mood, blood pressure, um, I was chatting with these interns earlier. We reviewed something and then we took a break for lunch so that everybody had a break before we got on and recorded this podcast, right? And in that break, I ate pretty quickly actually. And then my husband walked up the stairs and said, "Do you want to go for a walk?" Like perks of both working from home. And I was like, "Yeah." And we walked 2.5 miles in the hour break that we had, even with like warming up lunch. And I didn't really want to today. It's been a while since I've worked out just because of the life things, but I felt more energized. I felt my mental health better. It was such a mood booster. And I know that the exercise piece, moving your body, straight line in research, people who exercise sleep better, period. Like, I don't care what type of exercise, I don't care how long. You moving your body versus you not moving your body in the day, you're gonna improve your sleep quality. Time outside and amount of time outside is also another factor for sleep quality. And we can see that in research. But I think the other like common sense side of that too is if you're sitting outside drinking a cup of coffee in the morning, I hope you're enjoying that and you're not scrolling on your phone. And maybe this is like the most important and yet difficult thing that we can say is like, you got to stop just being on your phone all day long for 40 million reasons, but it's not helping your sleep. It's not helping your PCOS health. It's not helping your self-esteem. It's not helping your productivity. It's just not. It's not really helping. And connect with the people around you. That will help your sense of mental health and well-being, which will also impact your sleep. I mean, we can dance around this a million different ways, but I love that you chose this. I thought you knocked it out of the park in how you addressed it, both in the article that you wrote, which we'll link to in the show notes here if you want to dig a little bit deeper. But I also just love like the personal tie to this in a way. I think it colors the picture really beautifully if we go back to our mural or tapestry idea. Is there anything else you want to say about sleep or PCOS or even just your personal experience before we kind of put a bow on the episode that we didn't cover or you just want to encourage the listeners with?
Yeah, I think one thing that what you said reminded me of talking about being out in nature. I think we always think, oh, sleep, it has to be this regimented thing. Or we see that on the internet, like, oh, you have to do this, then this, then this, like a list. And I think you don't have to be, it's not that serious. You don't have to be like doing everything everyone says to do. I think really listening to your body is important and seeing what works for you. One day you might want to do something, the other day you want to do something else, and they both can be beneficial for sleep.
Oh, I love
And
that.
yeah, everything is very individual from a
Mm-hmm.
day-to-day basis. So doing what you can is better than doing nothing. And
Yeah,
that's my biggest takeaway from that.
absolutely. Like I say it in my work, done is better than perfect, but um, like an intentional shift because you are choosing to take care of your body and love your body. Wow. Like even if that's a little thing, wow, what a shift that is. Like I love myself enough to try to focus on sleep because I know that's going to help me tomorrow. It's like the same reason why sometimes I choose not to have a glass of wine at night because I know it's really going to impact my sleep quality and tomorrow's Caitlin is not going to thank tonight's Caitlin for that choice. um Hey friends, we're taking a break from our episode to talk about one of our sponsors. And this sponsor is the PCOS app. Did you know that I made an app all about PCOS? Well, I did, and you can find so many resources in it. We have slowly moved all the resources from my PCOS Hormone Academy course over into the PCOS app, and that talks about all things PCOS topically. Like if you have acne, you can go look at the skin and acne modules and see what does Western medicine offer? Why does this impact PCOS? What can we do about it? What are natural remedies? What are nutritional remedies? We talk about hair loss and hirsutism all through that lens where we go through what is it? Why is it impacted by PCOS? Or why do we need to pay more attention to this particular thing? And what can we do about it? And we provide a vast resource to help you both advocate for yourself at the doctor's office and treat yourself at home naturally. Now, the exciting thing that I want to share with you is starting in January 2025, we're starting to migrate all of the content that I have published so far on fertility into this app. I used to sell a course for $700 all about how to get pregnant with PCOS, and that is all getting moved into the app between January and March. So you can take the course as if you enrolled in the whole thing for $10 per month. So head to your app store, whether you're on a Google Android device or an Apple device. If you type in PCOS app, you just look for that really pretty lavender flower, you'll find it. Download it and join us because you're going to get weekly recipes and all the fertility focused PCOS content that you need. It will start being uploaded under the Academy tab. So stay tuned for that. And let's get back to our episode. Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you again for doing this scary thing and coming on a podcast and for being a wonderful intern. And also, I want to thank you again for sharing a little bit of your story with the listeners because I think that was compelling and I think it helps color in some of this. And I know for sure somebody's going to relate to your story a bit. So thank you for that.
Thanks for having me. This was such a great experience, and you've been an amazing preceptor these last couple weeks. So I learned a lot.
Yay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Of course.